This week we're looking at which Xenos filth should be joining your side. Again, this is no dirty dozen, it's just 10 of the most versatile and impressive Xenos characters in the game that you'll want to be leveling up. In at number 10, it's the blue-faced Tau ethereal Onshi, and this aged warrior really should be in retirement already, but due to his exceptional skills with the Honor Blade and apparent lack of younglings able to keep up with this venerable master, he hasn't been able to hang up his ponytails quite yet. With his old age getting the better of him, he seems to have a complete lack of traits, which you would think would put him pretty low in the legendary event list of best characters, but somehow this incredible martial fighter has constantly been sitting around the top of that list so far, mainly due to his Power 5 melee attack. In battle, he is quite a unique passive, the Serene Unifier, that alternates between different buffs that he grants himself and adjacent allies, or Tau within 2 X's. In round 1, his Sense of Stone reduces damage. In round 2, his Sephir's Grace makes characters move 1 extra hex. In round 3, using his Storm of Fire, units gain extra damage, and then it cycles constantly back through those until the match ends or Onshi dies. This is definitely an interesting passive, and it has its uses, but it's his active, Inspired to Greatness that really makes this character impossible to drop from this list. This lets a character reuse their active for a second time and they get a little bit of health to top them up too. This has made Onshi part of the Ragnar Bomb trio, alongside Ragnar and Celestine, where we see Ragnar War Howling, Onshi refreshing the War Howl, and then Celestine using the extra damage to Sky Strike into the backline of enemies, while Ragnar rampages through the front of them. It's incredibly destructive and horrible to be on the end of. So if you want twice the fun in your actives, then you could do a lot worse than picking up Onshi. In at number 9, we're going green with Snotflogga. This overgrown fusion of fungus and animal cells has somehow evolved to have patience, and it's that patience that allows them to care about their smaller orcoid friends, and this has definitely been a character who's benefited from a solid rework. Unlike the recent Tank Smasher rework, which has barely moved the needle, Snotflogga is becoming a solid addition to many modes, including legendary events, arena, salvage runs, and guild wars. The only area he really lacks is in guild raids, because he's a super good all-rounder, but not a serious damage spike by himself. The real power in this Beast Slayer is his menagerie of characters that come with him. Using his Squid Hound passive trait, his trusty dog will take a big bite out of anyone Snotflogga attacks, and then if there's less than 5 grots on the field, he will not only summon another one, but all grots will ignore their usual battle fatigue. And with the grot's own pile-in trait, the board can get pretty full of these little rascals, because if a grot has full health at the end of its turn, it has a 75% chance to spawn another one in. Minus 5% for each friendly grot currently on the board already though. And if that wasn't enough of the little grots in the battlefield, his active spawns another grot next to Snotflogga and any enemies. If you get it into the right position, it's a great tactical attack that will see the grots punch the enemies and also taunt them for a turn. And all of these characters really work well with the new orc passive Get Stuck In, because when an enemy's getting surrounded, then all your green guys get to do an extra hit. So if you need a green joker in your pack, then definitely make sure to pick up this fun guy. In at number 8, it's the Howling Banshee Phoenix Lord Jane Czar. This Storm of Silence is an incredible acrobat and sword maiden, famed for her speed and ferocity. Practically a ballet of blades all wrapped up in an amazing mask and hair, and Jane Czar moves so quickly while in battle that she's practically a blur to the opposition. Tossing out her silent death, Xenos More, this triple-bladed weapon was forged in the anti-flame of the warp, and it really does some serious damage. I've been using her recently as an accompanying force to the Ragnar Bomb, because after Ragnar is war howled, her silent death can actually wipe out 4 characters in one go. But it's in legendary events that I've been using her most recently. With her Terror's Lament passive reducing melee attacks quite a bit, I stick her next to Tyrant Guard and have Incisors just behind them, and this trio can easily push through all the difficult piercing battles, or any battles where you need a bit of defensiveness and Isabella isn't available for some reason. So if you need a red-haired beauty in your life, you could do far worse than this little banshee. In at number 7, it's the Firefight Marksman Shosil, or to give them their full name, it's Shasui Viorla Shosil, and this was a very difficult choice whether I go with Calandis or Shosil for this spot. As I mentioned in my last top 10 Imperials video, which is linked below, I've been trying to avoid overlapping too much with characters, but it's so difficult to split Calandis and Shosil. In fact, I put it to the vote in my guild, and Shosil won by 1 single vote as the more effective and flexible character. So just know that Calandis is definitely not being ignored here and stands right behind Shosil Shosil. As another piercing one-hit character, I use them a lot in my piercing legendary team, as they can hide at the back to combat their weaknesses and spam out the MV-71 sniper drone squad. And these little drones are so annoying to deal with for the opposition. They are built of a material that seems to be even less tough than a wet napkin, but they absolutely pound out the damage if left in the back lines. And anything they hit adds a marker light, which increases Aldari damage by 15%. If the enemies are out of range, they'll lock onto them and drop a rather large seeker missile on their heads at the start of the next round, nuking them into dust. So if you want a backline character that spawns in cute little drones to blow your enemies away, then Shosil's the one for you. In at number 6, it's the psychic organism zoanthrope, Neurothrope, and this horrifying Tyrannid has actually been created using harvested Aldari DNA to help form living conduits to the Tyrannid hive mind, which is the collective consciousness of the Tyrannid species. So it's a pretty nasty creature, and on the battlefield this thing really does some damage that belies its weird looking features. It flies across the battlefield, staying on the periphery to make sure it maximizes its damage, but close enough to enemy psychers to weaken them with its shadow and the warp trait. As a psyker itself, it keeps other Tyrannids focused on the battle at hand with its synapse trait that allows other friendly units to ignore any instinctive behavior or battle fatigue they may suffer from. And of course, as a psyker, it only has one hit, which makes it a great addition to any one-hit legendary event battles, although you do need to be very careful with its positioning due to its weaknesses. But its real power comes in the form of a very nasty neuroparasite that it infects into its enemy, and once this parasite is in you, it isn't leaving anytime soon. Then anytime the enemy takes any further psychic damage or is suppressed, then Neurothrope starts dealing more and more damage to it, and this damage can get super painful. For that reason alone, Neurothrope has found a real spot in guild raid battles. Alongside a motley crew of Abraxas, Thaddeus and Eldryon, they pump the suppression and psychic damage into enemies, and once they've stacked those neuroparasites, Neurothrope throws out the Spirit Leech, which damages the enemy and heals all the Tyranids around it. So if you want something that is ahead of a xenomorph from the movie Aliens stuck onto the body of a shrimp, then this one's for you. In at number 5, we have another Tyrannid, Tyrant Guard, and for all of you out there that know me well, you know just how much I appreciate this big monster. As someone that has always played a tanky character in video games, it already calls to my heart. Throw in some Space Marine DNA, don't bother putting any eyes on its head, and you have the ultimate Xenos bodyguard. I've spoken a lot about this colossal living shield's uses, but for me, it's the second most important character behind Isabella for succeeding in legendary events. If you position Tyrant Guard in the middle of your team and stick it next to someone like Neurothrope with its synapse range, or just don't move it at all, then Tyrant Guard will straight up reduce the amount of damage that all adjacent units suffer by up to 33%. But not only this, being a huge giant, they have the big target trait that also reduces the number of hits adjacent friendly units take from ranged characters. Together, this is a massive difference and means that with the right team around them, they can survive all the way up to stage 12 of a legendary event. As you might expect, in terms of offense, this character doesn't do major amounts of damage, but it isn't any slouch either. It crushes enemies with its claws, taunting, suppressing, and pushing enemies away that annoys it, and if that isn't enough, they will crushing strike them, dealing an extra 50% melee damage if it hasn't moved that turn. All in all, this is always a really important part of your team wherever you need a defensive character, so if you want to survive forever, then pick up Tyrant Guard and let them get punched instead. In at number 4, it's the Dark Reaper Phoenix Lord Morgan Ra, and I think this self-proclaimed harvester of souls can be summed up in something that it loves to quote: "War is my master, death my mistress," and that is exactly how they live their life, seeking any advantage possible in battle to win. The reason for it being so high up in this list is simple: it absolutely pounds out a ton of damage to enemies. If you step into its overwatch, it'll rip you apart with 6 heavy rounds to the face. If it hasn't moved, it's an extra 25% range damage, but it also has inescapable accuracy, which ignores any hit reductions from hex or unit effects, and also adds in extra crit chance and extra crit damage. All of this works on their normal attacks and abilities as well, so it's just devastating. They also have their Mogatar weapon, which loosely translates as the Harvester, and it fires discs big enough to decapitate you at range, or if you get close enough, then a quick swing of its blade will deal death in the same way. I haven't leveled this one up personally, preferring to use its normal attacks instead, but it's there if you need it. And if you want to power power those normal attacks up even more, then pair them up with Thaddeus Noble and Eldrion, whose passive adds even more damage to Maugan Ra. So if you want a real powerhouse to reap havoc on your enemies from the backlines, pick up the Harvester of Souls and get hoovering. In at number 3, it's the Farseer Eldrion Yinadun, and this character is one of the most potent psychers in the entire galaxy, so you might be wondering why they are only sitting at number 3 in the top 10 Xenos characters, and it's simply down to the fact that they may be super powerful, but they are definitely not super flexible. They can slot in most teams, but it's really as an ultimate powerhouse in guild raids that they've found their place. Their amazing power sits in the passive Doom, which all top guilds have leveled to 50 due to the insane buff that it gives your characters. If you position Eldrion 2 hexes away from an enemy, then they will give bonus damage to any character that attacks that enemy. But not only this, Aldari units get even more damage with this buff, which makes Maugan Ra, Kalandis serious sniping bodyguards for Eldrion. Damage wise, they do okay with their psychic attack that'll bounce to a random enemy, but their own power really comes from their executioner attack. If you wait until the later rounds of the battle to drop this active, it will deal extra damage for each round that started to not only your target, but also an adjacent one too. So if you want to maximize your damages, then start saving those XP books, because it's going to take you 2 months to get Eldrion to level 50, but it sure is worth it. In at number 2, it's the Canopec Spider Aleph Null. This constantly awake drone was a real close decision between becoming my number 1 or being in number 2, and in all honesty, I think they're probably pretty interchangeable. Aleph Null was my first ever and currently only Diamond 3 character, and this little skittering mechanical spider has done so well for me in so many modes. Until I got him up at Diamond 3, I would use him in pretty much everything, although now I'm letting other characters soak up that valuable XP instead. His main power is in the passive, the Fabricator Claw Array, which repairs a random mechanical character at the end of its turn even if he attacks something. This constant huge heal along with his own living metal body makes him more valuable to me in a team than Makotep, as he can really keep others topped up. I personally love having him alongside Revas, just healing away while he's fighting. Back both of them up with Actis and you have a near invincible team. He flies around the battlefield with ease, propelled by sophisticated anti-gravitic engines, and just when you think you've got him cornered, he will drop some lovely scarab hives on your head and fly away to heal again. This is pretty frustrating in Tournament Arena, where you can end up chasing this little spider all over the map. Meanwhile, you blink and suddenly the map is filled with multiplying scarabs and you wonder how on earth your team with only one hit each will get rid of them. When you do finally catch and kill him, he'll explode, seriously damaging anything around him. So make sure you pick up this lovable little spider and get healing. And at number 1, it's the battle-suited Tau Revas, or to give them their full moniker, it's Shasfre Viorla Revas, and that designation alone tells you how important this character is. The Shasfre part, showing how much they've already gone through numerous trials of fire and are a hero in the eyes of the fire caste to which they belong. Coming from the planet Viorla, Revas dons their XV8 Crisis battlesuit to make them as well armoured as other factions' light tanks, and wow, they certainly show up as an intimidating presence in the battlefield. When I was a new player, I was in absolute awe of this giant mech that flew across the battlefield, and then using their early warning override would kill all my characters in arena, and it was just one of the scariest troops out there. So I made it part of my early mission to pick up Revas, and although I came to the understanding that their early warning override just works for 1 round and is easily avoidable with suppression or just waiting a turn, this character has been a constant corner piece of a lot of what I do in Tacticus. They are a main part of my Guild Wars defensive team, the Metal Maniacs, which sees them joining Makotep, Actis, Aleph Null and Anafet in a constant healing, overwatching, spawning and smashing you in the face team that I would not want to be coming up against personally. In legendary events, they're one of the first names going into any battle where they're viable. Being supported by either Actis, Aleph Null or Makotep, they're basically a guaranteed stage 12 completion for me as I have them at diamond level. In arena, they always lead my troops against the AI, who are all too happy to stumble into his overwatch and be taken down, and it means I can speedrun through my battles for the day without without worrying too much about it. And in guild raids, they're a crucial part of my Screamer Killer and Gazgul teams currently, as well as fitting in very well with most of the other ones. Revas works especially well against the mechanical Gazgul, as the cyclic Ion Blaster passive attached to the battlesuit's right arm will do extra damage against mechanical targets. The only thing holding them back is their close combat weakness, as they end up doing less melee or range damage when they start a turn next to someone, but it's a minor detraction from the power this character brings to the Xenos teams and the assistance they'll give you to the game overall. So stick on your mech helmet, pick up your joystick, and get down to some serious greater good action. And that is our top 10 Xenos for this quarter. Some big characters just missed out, like Anufet, Makutep or Athana, and especially Kalandis as I mentioned. And if you're wondering why, I just feel there's someone in the top 10 that can fill their place just that little bit better. But this has been a much more difficult list to put together, as I have 14 absolutely solid characters that deserve to be here. But in the end, I stand by the list above. You focus on any of these and you're really going to be improving your overall team. Either way, let me know if you have a different top 10, why that is, and whether you want to see more top 10s in the future.